Mental health, anxiety, depression, whatever you're struggling with, looping, struggling, mental struggle, psychological struggles. We are not here to struggle. We are not here to dread the day. We are not here to be looping. We are not here to suffer. We are here to enjoy the life we've been given, and the system is set up for you not to be able to do that, right? So a lot of systems are purposely, I would say, designed for you to struggle, for you to keep looping, for you to suffer psychologically, mentally, emotionally, okay? In a lot of different ways. You are here to self-actualize. You are here to become who you are in your essence, in your heart, at your core. The trouble is, that kind of knowledge, we're not learning about who we are. We are learning about who we should be and what successful life means and what we should be doing on a daily basis. But we are serving everything and everyone around us, every system, every country, wherever you are. But you're not here to do that. You're here to serve yourself. And there is a lot of different, very damaging narratives. Your belief system is being installed onto your consciousness. Not so much installed, but your consciousness is being programmed for self-loathing, not liking life, not liking yourself. You are being told what is wrong with you constantly. We are being told what is wrong with us. But we never told what's actually good about us. We never told what is the meaning and purpose of life, right? I'm an ex-therapist. I left the profession because I've realized that people are not being taught about their wonderful consciousness. So the thing that we've learned, the old paradigm as I call it, the psychology, the mental health. I worked in the UK, so I'm referring to the UK. European style of thinking, shall we say. I lived in 3 countries, European countries. And what I've realized over the years is that belief system we are being programmed for a certain belief system. And the belief system in the Western world is that there is always something wrong with you, right? There is always something wrong with you. Within the mental health profession, all the diagnosis, all the labels that we are being given, very disempowering narrative. It's making us feel hopeless and helpless as a society, as families. We don't know how psyche operates. So I'm here to teach people about their wonderful mind, about the nervous system, about the nature of consciousness. If you found your way, and if you're happy within yourself, you have the life panned out for you in exactly the way you want, then you're not going to learn anything here. But if you are struggling for what are in your mind, in your body, with your emotions, with your psychology, stay around. We got to get the hell out of our house. Why are some people obsessed with others? Weights, right? Or what? I don't understand the question. people are being programmed to hate other people. People are being programmed to constantly compare ourselves. And this comes from the fact that humans are wired for two things. Human animal is wired for two things. Seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. These are two main motivations when you are unconscious on the sort of on the survival level. Like, so you're here to survive, of course, and these two, seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, right? Navigating life through, in order to survive, these are the two motivations. And the system knows this, right? Any society, any organized religion, any institution, you have fear in you have a part of your brain called amygdala, and that's fear center. So when that's activated, hence all the fear mongering, when that is activated, your focus moves away from you and goes onto other people, right? So all the narratives are here to keep us separated from each other on every single level. Think about how many wars are there now, and I'm not talking about literal wars, even though there are plenty, but people are fighting with one another within families, relationships. It's men versus women, it's generational war, right? It's the neighborhoods, the countries, like who is... So there's always someone to blame, because the survival part of consciousness works in a way that if you are scared enough, you will be looking for someone to blame, right? You will be looking for someone to find a reason. Find a reason. Why is this happening to me? And obviously communities are broken. And I'm not saying communities is the answer, no, but people are basically, their minds are being programmed to find a reason, to find an explanation for their suffering, let's say. And this happens on so many levels. Your mind is an entry point to your consciousness. And they cater for everyone. What I mean by this is that you have a lot of creative power. You need to be occupied with your mind, in your mind, right? So they'll find you. There are so many different realities, and there are so many different narratives and belief systems now that they will cater for every person, for every archetype. And I'm going to talk about the archetypes today, right? So the way you think is very unique. The way you perceive reality is very unique to you. You have a very unique consciousness, let's say. And depending on where you are, and most people are in survival mode, in survival consciousness. So as I said, it's being scared, it's being thinking about the future. It's like, this is normal. We want to grow, we want to evolve, we want to develop. We should be, but this is not supported. What's supported is division, isolation, right? So they will find a way to make you think, oh, you know, it's all about the body, or it's all about education, or it's all about this, or it's all about where you live and what you own and things like this. So it's the density of reality. And we are obsessive beings. So as I said, there's this creative thing. Your consciousness wants to understand itself. So you will be looking, you will be thinking, you will be engaging yourself on a psychological level with whatever comes your way, right? And there are so many things coming your way these days, because your attention is hijacked, your nervous system is hijacked. So whatever it's the, I don't know, weight loss, looks, right? So there's sort of the external identity. This is because people want to belong, right? And this is being used against you. And if you don't know about these things, how you operate, how your consciousness operates, how your nervous system operates, then you will be struggling. Even mental health, right? Anxiety and depression are nervous system survival. It's a way in which your nervous system communicates with you. There are signals from the depth of your nervous systems, because this is how your nervous system speaks to you. And even that has been pathologized, right? So we're going to do some reframing of anxiety and depression today as well. And then you're being blamed for it. It's your fault. You have this disease. Okay, electricity just went. Can't be dealing with this. I need to go and deal with something. Sorry, guys. Nikt nawet nic nie włączył, tak? No dlaczego to się wyłączyło?
Right. Co się stało? O kurde. Prąd. Ale to jest włączone przecież. Jest włączone.
Sorry, guys. Some technical issues. Can't see. I can't see how many of you are there. Okay. Good. We can see it's okay. Yeah, but the router... Oh, thank you. The router has stopped working, so I can't see what's going on in the lights, because it switched to 5G, but that's okay. Thank you for staying. Cool. Adopt, adapt, adjust. So every time, everything always changing and renewable, yes. I fear when person becomes people, everything always changing. Every time I see my sister, she mentions my weight and she compared myself to my old self. Yeah, this is what I mean, where I talk about people being pitted against each other. So your psyche and your nervous system is shaped and conditioned in the context of your family. And in order to have a good life, in order for you to understand yourself and have any degree of self-awareness, you need to understand and make sense out of this experience, okay? Of your childhood and of your you need to understand your family dynamics. Most people ignore it. Most people try to deal with life by forgetting about the whole thing. As I keep on saying, I think 95% of families are dysfunctional. So those relationships are really not healthy, right? Families are really dysfunctional, and humans work in a way that unless they have something in return, they they want something in return, their behavior towards their children, it's really appalling. I don't know. Why is that? It's the level of consciousness. And you are being born into the level of consciousness. So your family's values and the way they treated you and your nervous system and the way they approached you, they treated you in every single way. So physically, mentally, emotionally. And whether you were able to self-express freely, it's absolutely everything. This is what is the foundational part. Foundational history, like we learn about other countries, about the history and try to understand the history. This is the history of your nervous system. So what really happened there? Could you self-express? Did you have a childhood? These are the questions, right? What sort of childhood you had? Was it carefree? Was it full of burden? Was it full of difficult stuff, chaotic? That's really important. I think she feels happy and more confident when she mentions my weight. Yeah, right? So relationships are really transactional. This is what most people don't understand. And not everybody, just because someone is your family member, as you know, they're going to treat you, their intention is to treat you well, right? People are their inner state, not their personality, not their roles, not what they do. They are their inner state. They act out their inner state, right? That's why it's very important to know what sort of experience you've had for the first 2 decades of your life, or a decade and a half, where your nervous system is unconscious, you are unconscious about yourself. For the first 7 years of life, you're in hypnosis. 7 years, right? And people change their belief system when they go to one hypnosis session as adults. Think about the power that has. Environment is everything for your nervous system and for your mind and for your consciousness. Your consciousness doesn't respond to what you read, or your nervous system, what you read, or what you hear about, or whatever. It just responds to your immediate environment. Okay? So even in your house, in your childhood home, this is a separate system, and that's the first system, that's your first tribe you belong to. So that's very important. What was the politics there? What was the history? And not only that, but your mother's history and your father's history. These were the things that were playing in your field constantly, right? So when people are trying to have a good life or build relationships or whatever, without understanding themselves, this is the suffering, and this is really frustrating, because you cannot. Because most of what happens in your psyche and in your nervous system is unconscious. You're not aware by design, right? This is because even if you did realize what was going on around you, you had no choices. You couldn't do anything about your... I understand it's coming from lack of confidence in her. Yes, it's not about your weight, no. She's lacking... It's probably not even confidence, but this is how she learns to make connections. So making a connection is the first human need. And you learn that in your family. Your nervous system learns that, and then your mind and your ego are trying to figure out the way, what do I need to be here to belong? Right? And everyone is different. That's why you have 3 or 4 siblings, and everyone remembers things differently. Because you have your unique strategy and your unique set of skills and capabilities, right? Emotional, mental. So think about it as frequency. As a child, your frequency should be protected and should be nurtured. That's the idea, right? But that's not the case with humans. We, for whatever reason, in some families, children are not protected, children are not nurtured, and everything is very random. It comes from the fact that unless you were very lucky, people are the inner state. So if your mother was emotionally stable, mature, emotionally, psychologically, mentally, she was okay within herself, and your father was okay within himself, right? So they could respond to you in a way that they were present for you, then that's great. But again, that's in dysfunctional families. What the system is dysfunctional because the grown-ups are dysfunctional, and they project that state onto their children, right? So that's why it's important. We can't do anything about them. We can only do things with our consciousness. So you can't change anyone, you can't change the history, you can't go back and, I don't know, change things. This is for people who are still struggling and they want to have relationships with their parents, but they can't. You have certain needs in your childhood, and if your parents didn't meet them when you were a child, they have no capacity to see you for who you are, right? They only see their interpretation of you. Because our consciousness is the lens through which we look at the world, right? So the way we perceive things, people, concepts, etc., is very unique. Everyone has their own perspective and perception, right? So if your mother was low on level of consciousness, she didn't love herself, and there were a lot of trouble, you know, of whatever nature, there was and it's not related to the amount of stress, it's the ability to deal with the stress. Because again, right, when you have mature individuals, and that applies to even now in your life, if you're surrounded with people who are mature, okay with themselves, they have higher vibration, or they operate from the higher level of consciousness, they're very independent, so they don't need you, they don't need to put you down, right? So the functioning is really healthy, and everyone can function as a separate field and feed each other. That should be the case, right? But it's not. But what I mean by this is your level of consciousness will determine the way you see things and people. So if your parents were low, let's say, on the map of consciousness, then that would determine the way they see you. So if they didn't see you as a child who needed support, they didn't celebrate you as a child, they're not going to do that, because raising consciousness is an inside job. Unless something happens in people's life, they get ill, and that's not even always that. Immature individuals, they don't take responsibility for their part. And in dysfunctional families, parents abdicate their responsibility for their children. If you have children, or you're thinking about children, they're only... Hi, I love your content. Thank you. When I was a child, people used to tell me I'm beautiful. I think it's kind of jealousy. Again, you interpret things through your level of consciousness. So it's interesting that you think it's jealousy, that people were telling you you're beautiful and you think they're jealous, right? So this is an assumption. This is your level of consciousness will determine your worldview. A lot of people who are anxious, they can't take a compliment because you will never believe in the information that doesn't match your state. Your nervous system doesn't believe that to be the case. Then there you're going to reject it, right? Confidence and self-esteem and things like this are downstream from this. Everything is about your inner state. Your inner state creates your experience, your reality, and your inner state over time becomes your identity. So the intention here is for you to start observing yourself in a way to detach from the idea of the self, to detach from the idea that things are, it's like your fate, who you are, or who you needed to be, right? It's somehow your genetics, it's somehow your predispositions. You have temperament, yes, but you can't really move forward and evolve beyond your survival identity if you don't become self-aware. Self-awareness is the basic element, the foundation of everything. Everything. And a lot of issues within mental health, when I used to work with clients, even though, of course, people who came to therapy, there were the people who were curious about themselves, right? So there was some level of awareness, but the awareness that we have in our society, we identify with our brain and intellect and IQ and success and education. That's the issue. We don't identify with anything beyond that. We identify with the labels, we identify with the outer identity. So the self-awareness, it's sort of very superficial, right? And the self-awareness I'm talking about is about knowing who you are truly in your heart, in your essence, at your core. I did your exercises today for breathing, it's great. Good. We are our reality, quality and condition. True. So you're not going to get very far without self-awareness. Because if you're not conscious about who you are, if you're not aware, then you are really easy to be hooked into and manipulated, depending on where you are. As I said, your nervous system responds to its environment, right? So depending on where you are, what sort of group of friends you're with, then you're going to become all those different people. And a lot of mental health issues and anxiety and depression comes from the fact that people are not self-aware and people are not grounded in their authentic self, right? So their attention is constantly external, right? We don't practice in our culture being the internal awareness. Interoception is called. We only trained, right? We only trained for external, to watch out for the external, not for the internal. So we don't know how we operate, right? That's why our evolution cannot happen in this state. You cannot evolve, get better at life, create anything different from without self-awareness and while being unconscious. It just doesn't work like that, right? So no evolution can happen. You can't grow into yourself, who you truly are, if you're not self-aware. And not only that, it's exhausting. This is where the suffering comes from. Because if you think that your job is to be 17 different people throughout the week, then you're not centered, you're not anchored, you're not grounded in your own reality, but you are grounded in other people's realities. And it's almost like you rent yourself out to all these different people, right? Have you noticed that when you enter different systems, let's call, you behave slightly differently at work, you behave very differently with your family, you behave very differently with your friends, etc. You even like this is your subconscious trying to belong, right? You know that in order to exist, it's almost like, yeah, subconsciously you know that in order to exist, to connect with others, and on the evolutionary level, your existence, survival depend on connection, right? So again, survival, belonging strategy. And you're going to do everything not to be rejected. You're going to say different things. So you know the code. You can work out what's allowed, what's not allowed to say, behave, act, or whatever, right? So it becomes very performative. It becomes exhausting. Very often, depression is an outcome, a result of someone not living as them, living some other life, or being required or being obliged to live a life that is not yours and it doesn't come from, so it's like a disintegration of the self, and then nervous system collapses. It's shut down, right? That's depression for a lot of people. It's the how do I know if I'm aware of it or not? It's like substitute. How do I know if I'm aware of it? You train yourself to be self-aware. You observe yourself in your mind. There is a lot of power in your mind. It's like a stage, right? So becoming conscious about yourself is really watching yourself, observing your thoughts. You have that ability. Is not, this is not the agenda. The agenda is to be confused about who you are. The agenda is for you to be overwhelmed with the outer experience and to be in survival identity. So it does come from taking responsibility and ownership of your consciousness, right? And building practices around it. It's not going to happen in noise. It's not going to happen with other people around you. It does come from being on your own and the ability to be within yourself. Not outside, within. Not on the outer layer, inner reality. Okay? You are conscious in your mind, so you can literally observe yourself and your thoughts. Some people like meditation, some people like contemplation, some people use it. So there are different practices that you can do to be able to inquire. So it's called inner inquiry. And again, you have the potential, because consciousness wants to understand yourself. That's why a lot of people are really curious. That's why a lot of people are seeking, right? Because whatever the narrative you believe, I believe that's God trying to express itself. I believe I am a child of God. You might believe in the universe, the source, but it's not random. So you do need to be able to learn the skill, and the skill, it's the willingness to use your attention in the right way, right? There are a lot of different ways. Again, I can't tell you what that is for you, right? It's the inner presence. So you need to have some kind of protocol or routine, practice. That's why yoga is called practice. I don't do yoga anymore, so it's not like I'm pushing this on people, no. But definitely self-awareness, it's the inner presence in your inner space, and you're conscious in your mind. So to observe your thoughts, which are like we are very open. Your mind is open, right? So everything you watch, everything you consume with your mind is going to hijack, at least for the time being when you're watching or interacting with something, right? It's going to hijack and take this space and occupy the space in your mind, okay? Your thinking space. And again, the system knows this. So they want you to be occupied with things that make you overwhelmed, right? They don't want you to grow and evolve. Whether that's not on purpose or not is up for discussion. Some systems, I don't know any systems that are actually built for people to grow and evolve. Do you? Maybe you can help me out here. I think the only way now is to take responsibility. Here now I'm feeling present. So the inner presence, okay? How many people do you know who are present in the body somewhere? Like you sometimes you talk to them and you can see that their thoughts are not in the present moment. And it's a skill, okay? It's a skill. So it is about practicing, learning to observe your thoughts without judgment, to see how many of those thoughts do not come from you. They're not even yours. Your mind is full of opinions, belief systems, depending what you're watching and what you're listening to, that they don't come from the higher consciousness. They don't come from, that's the noise blocking it, right? So when people say, when talk about enlightenment, awakening, this is what they're awakening to. That their narrative, their mind has been hijacked and they've been made believe or identify with a certain belief system. Look what's been happening 5 years ago. What happened 5 years ago? What's happening now? We've been told that life is this and this is the way to have a good life or to be successful, right? But observe this, and these concepts change. Even if it's like jumping timelines. When you jump on the plane and move to a different country, the belief system is totally different. So it's all happening in the psyche and you're plugged in to a hive mind around you, right? And very often now, you don't have to leave home to experience something else on the mental level, but think about how many things you watch and consume, how many different belief system concepts, opinions, right? It's overwhelming. People, you cannot be surprised that you are anxious. You cannot be surprised that you are anxious. Or any narrative about who you are that comes from the outside is not a result of you doing the inner inquiry and really zooming out and seeing that life is a journey and you are developing, growing. The idea of a grown-up and the idea of age, it has nothing to do with age. Again, being able to observe yourself, it's a mature, you need to be emotional, you need to be honest with yourself. Again, right? So, whatever you like doing, stop consuming. The first thing you need to be doing is stopping consumption. Right? I talk about the mind very often. I compare it, the inner state, I compare it to inner home, right? So imagine you have a house inside of you. Your nervous system is like a plumbing and electricity in one. So it runs the light, it runs the warmth, right? It's the heating system, it's the water, it's the, all the piping, electricity, etc. Your mind is like a kitchen and a living room. This is where you spend the most time with. This is where you are present most of the time. Just like in the house. You go to sleep in your bedroom, but you spend time, of course, if you don't go to work a lot. So then you spend a lot of time in the kitchen and the living room. So it's the same with your mind, with your conscious mind. And now, the stuff that you consume and then you're allowing other people to come in, this is when you're cooking, right? In your kitchen, you're cooking your food. So think about mental narratives. You should know what food do you need. And it's the same with the thought process. Right? What are you interested in? What do you want to create? And you shouldn't be really thinking about the past. Yesterday doesn't exist. But this is how people are being kept stuck, right? So think about the mind and the living room, the kitchen and the living room of your home, and that's exactly the same space in your mind. This is where you are creating your food, your atmosphere, right? And yes, it does very often reflect your outer space. Because any growth and any evolution won't happen if you consume everything. Like excess, right? Anything goes. It is, if you compare it to the physical home, it's like opening the doors constantly and allowing all these people with their ideas, with their energy, with their issues, their problems. Watching news is like allowing all these different political systems that we don't understand, all these different cultures that we don't understand, because we have our own political system. You should have your own rules in your own house. You should be able to protect it. You should be able to declutter just the same way you clean your kitchen, tidy your kitchen every day. Because when you're existing in your inner home, and if you're not present, it's like the owner is not here and it's squatting. Right? Because other people will occupy that space. If you don't occupy that space, other people will. Because your focus is your attention here is the presence. So if you're present and attentive, what to allow in your home, outer or inner, right? This is, and learning to be the owner of the inner home, it can be overwhelming at times. People are like, oh my God, I've abandoned myself for so many years. Yes, because again, that's the narrative, that's the agenda, for people not to be aware of their consciousness, right? Of their inner home, where you should take a respite every day and relax and just be yourself. But what is that occupied with? Constant war, constant conflict. What is wrong with me? Judgments, labels, people whose intentions are not really good for you, right? Because everyone has their own level of consciousness. Set objectives and boundaries will be kept, right? So this is, think about it as being an architecture, the interior designer of your mind, right? And think about it as a living room. What space do you want to live in? What spaces do you like? What colors do you like? What atmosphere do you like? Right? A living room is a very good a metaphor here. And it's my signature metaphor. So think about that. again, we are being trained to consume, constantly consume. So it's like bringing furniture constantly, bringing furniture, bringing other people, constantly having debates, discussions, right? This is what your mind is being occupied with. I think even the podcasts thing, because it's all, they get into your mind and they install certain belief system in you, right? That's the ideology bit. So if you constantly spend your time and energy on dealing with other people, dealing with other, opinions, way of thinking, and this is disguised as knowledge and information, right? Oh, you should be knowledgeable. You should know about that. Really? Should you know about, stuff from all over the world that you can do nothing about? That's very overwhelming for the nervous system. Right? So this is the framework for you to think about your mind before you can do anything else. Start with the present. Start going into your inner space and observing your thoughts. It's like sitting on the sofa and seeing what has been going on. And very often when people are about letting go, it is literally having a ritual in your mind, like a mental exercise, mental ritual of opening the door and saying goodbye to certain things that occupied your inner space, your mind, right? Because hello, farm girl. Right? Because you can't really design your inner space. You can't really, you have a certain amount of time on earth and in this body, right? Which is your home. And that technology, nervous system and consciousness, which is the technology to build your inner space. So self-awareness is like going into the house and taking ownership and saying, okay, that's my space, so I need to get building, I need to get designing, I need to decide what do I want to keep and what do I want to say goodbye to, who do I want to say goodbye to, which belief systems, because actually it doesn't serve me, right? The fact that my empathy is being hijacked and I'm constantly being shown war, let's say, on the other side of the planet, that I can't do nothing about, and I'm feeling helpless, really is the energy. Your attention is the energy. Your focus is the energy, okay? You can't do anything. You can't self-actualize. You can't create anything when you're paying attention to someone, because your attention is a capacity thing, right? Think of it as a spotlight. And if you constantly direct it onto other people, you don't do that with yourself. You don't know what's going on internally, right? So first is there's awareness. Then self-actualization. So actually, this is a very old idea from Carl Rogers, who was the father of humanistic psychology, who is the only, actually, one of, maybe not the only one, but who explained and was really good at explaining inner reality, okay? One of the most famous books is On Becoming a Person, and they didn't use at the time, consciousness, because at different times they talk about the same thing under different labels. He didn't use words like consciousness or this sort of framework, but he did talk about light. He did talk about awareness and the presence and the connection and the conditions, right? Conditions around the person. In therapy, it's called person-centered approach. if for any of you who are interested in this. It's very simple and extremely powerful. He talked about conditions for growth, and he talked about conditions for self-actualization. So the person cannot become themselves if the conditions are not there, right? And it's only in childhood, even though, so he was the guy who made it a permanent condition in therapy to provide for clients unconditional positive regard, it's called, rooted in empathy, right? So no judging. So allowing the person to express what they need to express without forcing your ideas. And then all the other therapy styles and frameworks just destroyed it. It's not addiction, it's dedication, exactly. The ultimate addiction is the addiction to the idea of the self. Okay, so I'm going to go into addictions in a minute, but I just want to talk about the conditions for growth, conditions for evolution. So over the years, that has been translated into teaching people how to love themselves, right? So basically in therapy, the therapy behind the process, the therapeutic process, was the idea, originally of course, to make the person, to provide conditions for them to start accepting themselves as they are and start loving themselves so they can internalize the feeling you give them. So unconditional positive regard, no judgment, etc. If someone experiences that and experiences empathy, this is where a level of consciousness can go up. And the person can wake up and say, oh my God, I'm not that bad, right? So it is all about experiences. And allowing for your nervous system to experience safety, no judgment. And again, why are we not teaching people this at school, right? It cannot be that only therapists know that. And the whole idea behind the therapy, it should be that you internalize the process so there comes a point in which you don't need your therapist. You cannot become dependent on your therapist for thinking, feeling, asking questions. You should become your own therapist. And therapy should be a stage and a phase. So this idea that we should be constantly paying someone just to feel okay, I'm against the whole idea as a therapist. Because you see what we've created. The root of all addictions, all of them, behavioral or substance abuse and addictions, whatever, is the conviction that you need something outside of yourself to function. And, you know, you can be addicted to therapy. You can be addicted to podcasts. You can be addicted to listening to people. You can be addicted to a substance. You can be addicted to a behavior. Again, I'm shaking inside because this is how deep that goes. Because the system supports this narrative that you need to be addicted to something. That's it. And that's the hill I'm going to die on. Keep being addicted to whatever, but start with awareness. So all my courses, all my frameworks are rooted in the idea that you do nothing first. You just absorb this kind of knowledge, absorb the understanding about your nervous system and the consciousness. And then you can start detaching yourself. The craving is going to go away. You're not going to have the need, because when you can give yourself, when you start having a deeper connection with yourself, when you actually start accepting yourself for who you are, because you are like everybody else, we are all equally stupid, as I used to say. We all get addicted, we all cup, we all screw up, we all make mistakes. We're humans. That's the nature of humans. There's nothing, this idea that, if people get addicted, they're weak. Actually, people who get addicted are very strong. And I made a content today about this, actually yesterday, right? That you want to be obsessed. You want to make a connection with, you want to understand yourself. So that ability is there, right? Your consciousness is capable of that. It's just that refocusing and becoming obsessed with yourself and moving forward an inch, like moving forward. That's the idea. Because self-actualization, right? It's the idea here is, it's a sense of direction. It's a process, right? It's not an event. It's not an event. And that process continues throughout life. So you should self-actualize as a 17-year-old, 50-year-old. You change as a person. You grow, evolve. You have different roles. You move. You change jobs, right? So you're doing that all the time anyway. You're doing that all the time anyway. You're wasting your energy and your time on things that are outside of you. Addictions, again, sometimes it's not very harmful, but if you basically identify more and more with things as you go along, and this idea gets consolidated. So the longer you're going to repeat something, nervous system is a repetition machine. The longer you repeat the pattern, the more toxic it becomes, because it does take away the authentic self. It numbs it, right? It numbs it. And it doesn't matter what you're addicted to. It could be being right, it could be your ego, it could be behavioral, it could be substance related, it could be emotional, right? People are addicted to drama. People are addicted to conflict, chaos, behavioral, obviously, plenty of choice. So the society is set up in a way, a lot of businesses, a lot of industries, they know it, that you have that need to make a connection outside of you, right? And everyone wants to make a connection. Everyone wants to belong. So stop looking at addictions as a moral choice. It doesn't make you better or worse, right? It's just the same way, just because you go to church, it doesn't make you a better person. We all have a personal relationship with ourselves and with our consciousness. We all do. So again, this idea, start detaching yourself from this idea that addiction is something, or whatever you are obsessing about, it makes you a bad person or a weak person. This is very interesting, right? We look like you're weak, you have no impulse control. In survival identity, no one has impulse control. That's why I think the society doesn't want people to get better and heal. How many things in the society are actually created for people to heal? Zero. It's all about keeping you dependent on therapy, on expert. Have you ever been addicted to alcohol? No. Alcohol, no, but nicotine. So yeah, yes, nicotine is, yeah, so I've been addicted, yeah. So with regard to mental health, it's it's very difficult to sometimes unpack, like, what was first, mental health issue or addiction, right? Very often, like, it's like the fact for me that people are being fragmented and chopped up, as I say, right? You've got mental health, your psychological health, you've got your physical health. You are one ecosystem. And everything is connected with everything. You can't really chop up your body. And it doesn't really work for us. Even Western medicine, it's great in emergency. But other than that, because we're treating ourselves like, you know, separate organs, we have doctors from separate organs and systems, even though it's all one. And mental health, yes, you are aware of that part of you in your head, but anxiety and depression are nervous system states. And they do come from experience. So your nervous system is a responsive system. So it responds to its environment. So if you've been through a lot of stress, chronic stress, mistreatment, bullying, and very often bullying happens in your family of origin, right? Constant threat, danger, and attack, systemic and chronic. There is no way you're going to come out of this feeling happy, joyous, and unbothered. Your nervous system will not allow you to do this, and you can suppress it, but you will get burnt out, right? I don't know who's new here, who isn't new, but I'm going to go into the States now. I'm not saying addiction is not serious. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, I don't know a single person who's been addicted or is addicted, but they haven't been through hell. Because on a very biochemical level, anything, cigarettes, alcohol in particular, okay, first of all, it's what's around you, so alcohol is readily available. I was born in Poland, and I lived there until the age of 23. Trust me, like we can drink, right? That was available. During communism, that was the only thing that was available. So what is available around you and how this thing is being presented to you, so what is tolerable, what is promoted basically, like, you know, like Polish people, that was the only entertainment for my parents. And then when I was growing up, that was the only entertainment. No, you haven't missed anything, we just... And my father was an alcoholic, a raging alcoholic, who drank himself to death at the age of 42. So I know a thing or two about alcohol. But on the biochemical level, is a pain suppressor. It's a numbing agent. And it's anti-anxiety agent for the first 20 minutes. People don't drink because they like the taste of alcohol. People don't drink, you don't end up drinking because because vodka is tasty, right? You drink because you want to stop feeling the pain in your nervous system, in your body, and you want to disassociate. And it's the best detachment strategy for the nervous system, right? That's the Western culture. So it wasn't ritual based, it wasn't. It's just, if your home life is shit as a child, and that is the worst feeling in the world, because it is, being rejected and not seen by your parents, not being important to anyone. It is the worst feeling, evolutionary speaking. Being exiled from the system that is supposed, from the tribe, right? Being rejected, judged, bullied, exiled. You stupid, you this, we don't care about you. Or being just treated as not, like you don't exist, right? Of course, there are different layers to this. It's the most painful feeling. That's why it's very difficult to find someone who is addicted to alcohol and had a really good, supportive childhood. Okay? My father was autistic and alcohol killed him. Sorry that happened to you. There's a very specific history in each family, right? So where was I going with this? Yes, so if your nervous system is exposed to lots of stress during childhood, chronic stress, and as I said at the very beginning, I don't know who was here, who wasn't, we are wired for two things: seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. And for the first however many years, addiction does that. Substance does that. Behavior does that. It gives you a false sense of pleasure, very short. So that's the whole dopamine thing, right? Which is, again, the molecule of pursuit. We all have dopamine, but it's being hacked into us. Like, again, we animals. So alcohol or whatever substance, weed, whatever, or nicotine will numb your nervous system to the pain, to the discomfort of how it feels to live in this world. And if you have, that's a biochemical shit here. So what's harmful in alcohol is not actually alcohol itself, but when alcohol breaks down in your body, it's broken down by your liver. There's a very difficult long word of a chemical that is being released in the process, and if you have an enzyme that can process this, and you feel a sense of euphoria after alcohol, this is a perfect prescription for addiction long run, because alcohol works for you. A lot of people, like Asian people, don't have that enzyme. That's why it's not very popular in Asia to drink, right? On a big scale, I'm talking about. There are cases. But we have different ways to break that down. And these are the people who vomit after alcohol, right? They just get it all out because their body doesn't have the enzyme and they just need to get it out. Or their body goes red. It's like a toxin entered the body and their body cannot cope and alchemize that, right? If you do, however, this is the thing about choosing your poison, right? Everyone has slightly different tendencies and capabilities. I think just because I'm Polish, so that has equipped me with that enzyme. So I've drunk my fair share. We are chemically driven beings. On some level, yes. I quit coffee and ciggy 3 days ago and today was feeling no pleasure of life. Exactly, that's the dopamine. So if you're constantly bombarding your system, you have a baseline of dopamine and you're bombarding, I didn't know I'm going to talk about this. You go over your baseline chemically, then to come back to the baseline, first you need to deep and go into the minus, right? So that's the deficiency you're feeling. It's a chemical thing. Just knowing this. and being conscious about what goes on chemically. But if things create euphoria in you, this is the danger. Because, like, you know, whatever we keep doing and we like it, we're going to do more of it. So when I say about you have an ability to get obsessed about something, this is the one. You're going to want to keep doing that. That's the craving, that's the dependency, that's the rhythm, and then you introduce it in your week, in your day. Everything happens around that, and you start to think, this is the ability of your mind. If you make something important, enough, your mind will make sure that you will focus on that. But the best pharmacy is actually in your brain. So I want you to start detaching yourself. There is a possibility in your consciousness to access this amount of self-awareness where that chemical loses its power. Right? That's the whole idea about AA. Right? What do you do there? This is the consciousness work. What do you do there? You follow the steps. I can't remember the step, but I think it's step 4, that you give yourself to the higher power. And that gives you the divinity, the divine connection with God or higher power that you discover. And you take your euphoria from this, because it is euphoric. So this is map of consciousness. I'm addicted to my addiction, Tomsky. Yes. Hi Jay, Chinese people struggle to tolerate alcohol. Exactly, because they don't have the enzyme. Most High will never lie. Hi. So when you go higher on the awareness, consciousness, when you actually start occupying your inner space and think, oh my God, I'm already perfect. I have this amazing brain. I have this amazing mind. There's a little bit of work to do, right? So I'm not saying you are a perfect, like there is no work. No, of course, there is work. There is some healing. You need to sort yourself out and start choosing yourself. Begin again every day and declutter your mind. Work on your nervous system, of course. But that could be your addiction. So get obsessed about self-development. Get obsessed about taking care of yourself. Get obsessed about the future, not the past. With your spotlight of attention. Right? So this is what I am doing here. I'm activating in you what is already there. We're not learning anything. We are learning. Because whatever you've been told about your psychology, it's bullshit. It is actually bullshit. From a therapist, you're hearing that. And I can debate anyone on this. Will we be able to live if we're not receiving dopamine from the body? Why would you not receive dopamine from the body? Why would you not receive it? Dopamine is a molecule of pursuit. This is why this is the action you take in order to get food and live. The animals have it as well, right? This is a system that gets activated for you to get up and start living. It's an ancient system in your brain. Of course, after abuse, there is a lot of abuse of a substance or behavioral. The system needs recalibration, the system needs healing, right? So supplements, that's why alcohol addiction is a vitamin B deficiency, right? So if you try to cut alcohol down, pump vitamin B into your system. For example, right? Your gut is needs attention. Like things do need attention to recalibrate and come back to balance it out, because at the end of the day, it is a toxin. It is a toxin. It's a neurotoxin that compresses your nervous system and floods your system and your brain. I mean, it's very damaging, but any damage can be reversed. Any damage can be reversed, unless your liver is failing, but I don't think we're talking about this kind of level, right? Anything can be reversed. So sometimes it's about feeding yourself stuff that rebalances the microbiome in the gut, and this is how the system has a healing mode all the time. You just need to get out of the way very often. Can we go back to childhood trauma, emotional by prime caregivers, bullying and exclusion? I do end up talking about it quite regularly. So the addiction will keep you there, and you think, oh, that's it, right? That's it. This is what I wanted to say. AA program, where you actually realize that you are connected to source, you have a divine connection with God, or whatever terminology you want to apply to this. Then you know that euphoria can come from you, so you don't need the substance. And you don't want the substance. Right? So in a present moment, learning, you need to become to yourself, you know when people say, oh, you need to become the person you want to be. No. You need to meet yourself where you are and start building reparative experiences for your nervous system. So everything your parents didn't do, they ignored you. You have to stop ignoring yourself. They bullied you. You have to stop bullying yourself. They labeled you, judged you. You have to stop doing that to yourself. The idea here is to reparent yourself. Right? This is how you reverse the process of self-neglect. Because at the end of the day, the difficult childhood meant that you didn't have your needs met. Physical, emotional, psychological, right? So you have to start living internally in a way to fill that void. Because that void is painful, uncomfortable, shameful, right? That's the shame. So you need to go above that version of yourself, that internalize the treatment that you were exposed to. This is who you need to become if you are at the beginning of the healing journey. Right? And this is why I teach what I teach. so people can become this. So you don't have to rely on a therapist. You don't have to rely on an expert to tell you what you need to be doing. Because guess what? As a child, you need a different kind of attention on different days. That's your nervous system. So, for example, I function quite well these days, right? But my nervous system has different needs on different days. I think differently, things change. It's weather dependent, guys. Think about yourself, how you function when the sun is shining versus when it's not. This is, nervous system is a responsive system. So you need to be able to go into your inner world, inner state, and listen. What's needed today? Am I overstimulated? Am I understimulated? Do I need to rest? Or do I actually need to do my shit? Because the way to regulate your nervous system differs every day. Leave your behaviors for now. Don't think about your addiction. It's downstream from the state. Okay? Addiction is downstream from the state. Mental health is downstream from the state. Everything first is the state of the nervous system. Then that creates emotional layer. Then your mind is a meaning-making machine from the experience. So this is experience, body, nervous system, right? Then you've got your emotions, will match the state, which will match the state. Then your mind will build a meaning around this. Ego story. Narrative. One of the rules of the nervous system is story follows state. And then from that, you have actions, behaviors, habits, right? So people who are working on this, like mindset coaching, right? You're only dealing with this, you're trying to force yourself to think differently about yourself, where this is how you feel about yourself, it's here. How the body feels about itself, how the nervous system feels at the core. So if the childhood, this is the safety system, survival system, that makes all the decisions for you, runs your organs, beats your heart, deals with your digestion. It also deals with your mental state. It comes from that. So if you had a happy childhood and you were cared for, loved unconditionally, celebrated, listened, supported, people were curious about you, who you are, so you could freely self-express, you could grow, evolve into a strong, capable version of yourself. So the state would be what? I'm okay, I'm good, I believe in myself, right? This is what is very rare, but it happens. I know people like this who actually left home, and for them that's their reality, right? Because the inner state creates your sense of self, your emotional self. So the emotions will be positive, joy, curiosity, everything that was celebrated and cultivated at home, then you take it outside of home, right? So these are the people who are not scared of anything, or they confident, you call them, right? They're not confident. They may be scared, but they believe in themselves the way the parents believe in them. That it's okay, it's only grades, the teachers don't matter. I believe in you, I love you. This is everything, the behavior is being modeled, right? So you would have joy, curiosity, which is playfulness. Whatever was celebrated at home, creativity, playing instrument, whatever. This is where your nervous system learns what the world is like. Like if your parents love you, then you think everyone is like that, right? This is, you act out your state of the nervous system. What would happen in your mind? Story follows state. If this is the state, this is the emotional state, what would happen in your mind? I'm okay, I can do anything is possible, I'm capable, I'll find a way, I will figure it out. So you believe in yourself and your thoughts reflect that, right? Story follows state. So in your mind, anything, I am, people are, the world is. This is where your worldview is being shaped. Your inner reality is being shaped, right? For the first 7 years of life, that's non-verbal. You're in hypnosis, and this is not about words, it's about feelings, sensations, right? Of safety versus non-safety. Do you feel supported as a child? Can you rely on adults around you? Do you see them as someone who is on your side? Do they stand up for you, right? Because you're their child. Do they treat you with respect and dignity or not, right? And then, if you feel like this, if you have this idea of the self, right? This is the idea of the self. Self-concept is a positive one. Then you're going to take the action that is aligned with your self-perception, emotional state, and the feeling of safety in your body. Okay. And now, our wonderful childhood. Good evening, Eleni. If your childhood was great, your heart will be open. The world is great. You're going to see, because the state determines your perception and your perspective, right? You basically, your identity creates your reality. And if your identity hasn't been hindered, right? And you just, like, you have a very healthy relationship to the self. And you know yourself enough. You know you can make a mistake, but that's okay because you're young, right? Because that's very often, this is what happens in dysfunctional families. You can't make a mistake, so you end up doing nothing and you're being frozen. However, when there is no safety, emotional, psychological, what else? Physical. So your physical boundaries were not protected. You were shoved, pushed, and all the other extremities of that, right? So you were not embraced in a loving, protective way. Your body has learned that your physical boundaries don't matter. So, no safety, right? And then your emotions don't matter. You couldn't self-express freely, authentically. So no one was curious and interested, because that's the condition. So your parents mirror you. They should mirror you, right? But for that to happen, They need to be healthy themselves, but they're not. So you couldn't be free. You couldn't move around freely because there were always some kind of punishment or, you know, everything was your fault. You had to look after your siblings, whatever the story was, and the story is quite complex. Always, it's never one thing because it's a system that involves a lot of people and a lot of other systems. So you can't express freely, mentally, verbally. You know, whatever you say or share yourself. So you couldn't share yourself because if you did, you were mocked, laughed at, labelled, judged, oh, you stupid, we don't say that, we don't do that, or that's whatever. Then if you weren't good at school, again, so your, not only love was conditional, but what you did and said, was always criticized and judged, so it's like being put on trial all the time. You had no safety. Again, we're going back to no safety. And this is what your body experienced. What emotions do you gonna have about yourself? And what does the body, what's the state the body is going to keep you in? Right? If there is no safety, the first thing is fear. Right? Adrenaline, cortisol, stress, basically. There's constant threat, emotional, physical. And remember, your parents are your gods. Right? So the family dynamic, and gods very often abuse their power. So if there was some kind of tyranny, some form of tyranny, ego tyranny. So what is tyranny? Some kind of tyrannical force or power. Like addiction, right? Any sickness of the ego, so narcissism, Machiavellian, sadistic tendencies, men and women, fathers and mothers, right? Just mothers, if they have screwed up ego, so if there's sickness of the ego, if they're possessed by the ego, they will torment their children in a very different way to the father, but this is the evil part for you, right? So if you've met the evil, you know what I'm talking about. And sadly, a lot of people have met the evil. So you are constantly scared, right? Shame. What happens in healthy individuals is we internalize what happens to us and we think this is our fault. Yeah, if my parents are telling me that I am useless and horrible and everything is my fault, it must be true. You do that for belonging because you don't have any other choice when you're 8, right? So you take reality as it is and you form it into survival strategy. If you're feeling this, then, since we said story follows state, the mind will make meaning around the state, okay, and the emotional state, and that's the mental state. What you can obviously fill the gaps here, right? And that on its own is like a separate 5-hour thing, so I'm trying to keep it simple, which is not easy for me. So you can fill in the gaps for yourself. Stuff I've heard from clients. I am a nuisance. I am a burden. I am horrible, I am incapable. Like, really, you internalize. So your parents' voice becomes your inner voice. This is where you have your inner voice, right? That story is getting wired into you, and that becomes your default setting for thinking about yourself. I am stupid. I must be stupid. I am ridiculous. The story in your mind should be only occupied during childhood with one thing: playing and dreaming and being in the present moment. In dysfunctional childhood, making up stories, playing, right? In dysfunctional childhood, that doesn't happen because you are burdened and concerned with survival. So in order to survive, if my mum tells me that something is my fault for 15 years or my responsibility, I'm going to believe that because I don't have a means of survival outside of this family, right? This is how creative that part is. So, these are things about how worthy you feel. I am worthless. If you are treated as worthless, then you think you are worthless. That's the mechanism in the psyche, right? People are more important than me. People know better. So this is your sense of self, right? It starts. And then it depends how your parents operate, but for a lot, like they think they know it all, usually in dysfunctional families. So the teachers are either stupid, or you listen to the teachers, or whatever the story is. And this is your planet, and this is your first stories, and if it's repeated enough, then that becomes a belief system. And the world is scary and horrible. So that does become your worldview. The state becomes your worldview, right? And this is just, I'm just scratching the surface. So what actions and behaviors and habits are you going to have? They're going to be reflective of the state and of the narrative in your mind. And this is what people do. They try to change the behavior or discipline themselves, which is a very bad idea for someone who had a childhood neglect. A very, very bad idea. Because your parents were trying to discipline you. So, for your body, that's more trauma. Or if you're trying to change the mindset and just think happy thoughts, again, this is not authentic experience of your body. Your body will never allow you to do anything it doesn't consider the truth. Your body has its own experience. And the trick here, that's not the trick. This is the structure of survival identity and survival mode. You need to get your body and your mind on the same page by giving yourself reparative experience for long enough so you can leave this emotional state, and then you can work on your mind and create a new narrative, a new atmosphere, but you can't do it without your body. Anything, so people goals setting, right? Goals, or I want to have a good relationship, like I want to have a new job, right? Or career or whatever. Your body will not do that when in survival. So you will self-sabotage. So for a lot of people who are trying to force themselves to think positively, it's all about changing the mindset. It's all about disciplining yourself and introducing things like, of course there is some utility to this, and I'm not saying everything is fucked up, but if you are struggling, and if you're trying to do something and you know what you're doing to yourself is destructive, and you want to introduce new habits or stop some habits, if you don't change the internal state, your body will always pull you back to what it knows, what is familiar. Familiarity is the first principle of the nervous system. And change feeling. How do you heal the fear of life behavior? Always thinking the worst come on its way. This is, again, you need to transform your relationship to the inner state and decode the inner state. Because it's not, you don't get rid of it. You don't get rid of it. You upgrade it, alchemize it, and heal your relationship to your body, to your emotions, and to your mind. First of all, fear and anxiety are very natural. They're the evolutionary mechanism. Animals have it. The amygdala, like this is the lizard brain. It protects you from a lot of dangers. If you didn't have that mechanism in you, you would get killed very quickly, right? So you need to have that. The thing is, you develop the strategy, adaptive strategy for life, because obviously what do I need to do to survive in this toxic and dysfunctional system? But and it's an adaptive, protective strategy, right? So it has nothing to do with your potential, who you truly are, or where you're going in life. That's why it's very important to become conscious about this, because you can't change anything. You can't really change anything in a lasting way if you don't understand the nature of the issue, right? That's why you've got cognitive behavioral therapy, right? And the whole talking therapy here on this level, because the disconnection from the body is the issue in mental health, right? You can't heal trauma. You can't heal your body by talking about this. That's why a lot of people go to therapy and they can intellectualize, rationalize, name their feelings, name their patterns, but they're still numb. They're disassociated from the body, right? And again, that was your strategy for life, but then you can't really go any further. So any system then, a relationship or a family that you enter, where things are relatively healthy and balanced, your system is not going to feel that this is familiar, and it's going to be a clash, right? And it has a lot of forms. So the way I conceptualize it is, if you have unhealthy patterns, protective patterns, when you enter a system where there is no threat, if you're unconscious about this, you're going to create the threat, because you understand the reality from the inside out. So you're not allowing into your field of consciousness anything that doesn't match the state. And in here you build ideas about life, what your safety and unsafety, it comes down, it also is related to money. So how much you're earning, your ambitions, your standards, right? If you think that love means bullying one another, or it's an element of love, a lot of people actually say that, right? No, we do argue a lot, and that, but it's done with love. That's your nervous system under threat, putting yourself under threat. And what you think with your mind is not what your body thinks. So again, you will be justifying different things. Because if you think, having a relationship because your parents competed against each other, or there was a lot of power struggle. This is what you're going to associate with love, and that's going to become your standard. So if you're going to pair up with someone who is not interested, you're going to think they don't love you. So this is really, really deep. So we have the body, we have the psyche, and then we have the outer layer. This is basically the inside of you. And this is the outer. So people who are doing manifesting or any work just on this layer, and they're trying to imagine in their mind what they want. Without this, without alchemizing and upgrading the idea of self and teaching your body safety, calm, peace, because you always think it's an emergency. In survival identity, the stress and the fear, hence the burnout, okay? You're going to get nowhere, right? Or it's very frustrating. It's very demeaning to be wanting something. So if you feel like you know there is more, and I do think people are waking up, and you know, you've been hearing, there's a lot of knowledge, right? So you've listened to people, you've read stuff, but it's very artificial. But that feeling of there must be more, there must be a way. Yes, there is a way, and that's your consciousness. Upgrading the idea of the self, choosing yourself daily, learning a relationship with your nervous system and with your mind, and taking ownership of that inner space is the way. Right? So when you go on my profile, there's a link there, which if you click on it, this is the course, Mechanics of Mental Health, the course plus the practices. It's 8 hours of material about different elements of the nervous system, put in the simplest language, where you understand the mechanism, and you've got 28 practices, because it's the 28-day structure. You just have to show up. You do nothing, you do everything as you do, you just you activate the knowledge that is already there. You using the technology of self-awareness and becoming conscious about your inner reality. And you can do that many different times, and that's the only thing you need. And you learn that actually I start with the house story, right? So you've got, you know, the metaphor there to use, and it's about nurturing that relationship with yourself, because it's a skill, and really nurturing yourself back to life, so you can start feeling something, you can start showing up for yourself in a way that you need to, reparenting yourself, and actually, you know, again, you have a very unique nervous system. So if someone tells you, oh, this is how to do it, bullshit. Because for some people it's very physical, for some people are mental, some people will not respond to anything they don't understand, right? So some people are, they're thinkers, they want to understand. Some people, they need to be talking about things. Some people are introverted, they don't like talking. Men and women, and like, everyone functions differently, right? So you need to work with yourself and with your strengths. Number 2, so you've got 4 things there. Number 2, exit survival identity. There's a 6-week group program starting on the 7th of April, 7:30, which are Tuesdays for 6 weeks, 7:30 UK time. Course practices, 6 sessions, hour and a half, Zoom sessions, where I'll teach you things, and we go through the process of awareness, regulation and anchoring, increasing the capacity of the nervous system, and then integration. And you set for life. You've upgraded your consciousness, and off we go. That's why I don't have a community, and I'm not building a community, because I only want to meet you where you are, then activate your inner healer, activate the teacher, so you can work with yourself, and that's the skill for life. You know yourself, how you operate, and off you go, right? That's £325. Number 3 is mini course there, 1, or about fight mode. I'm going to do more, but for now it's only £28. And then for £49, for people who they can't be really thinking about how things operate, I've done 28-day journey, exit their survival, 28 practices of anchoring, grounding, very short, 4 to 5 minutes, how to practice the inner presence. And you've got exercises there which I demonstrate on your body. The maximum exercise is 10 minutes. So you go through the exercises every day for 28 days. You see which ones you like. You've got a workbook, and you can look at it on your phone. And then you can say, this one works, this one doesn't. This one my body likes, this one my body doesn't. So there's a process of learning the relationship with your body. You can use it every day, forever. I still do these exercises. And then for people who are ready to release all the bullshit, and you've done work on yourself, and you really want to get rid of survival identity and go into the higher level of consciousness, it's total identity upgrade, 90 days, 9 sessions, 1-to-1, online. That's 3K. Choose wisely. You living in survival is costing you so much energy. So because it alters your perception and your perspective on life, it filters into your relationships, into your parenting style, everything. And you wasting a lot of time and energy. And you will run into the same problems, right? Constantly. We need to appreciate bitter as well as the sweet. The thing about survival identity is when you're trying to block the pain, so you keeping your heart shut, you're sort of disassociated from your body, disconnected, detached. You're in protective mode. Remember, survival identity is a protective identity. Adaptive strategy. The thing about, for example, emotions, if you're trying to ignore the pain and disassociate from the pain, you won't be able to feel joy. You can't selectively detach from emotions. You can't say, I'm not going to be feeling pain, I'm not going to be feeling sadness, I'm not going to be feeling this. Because it's too painful, too uncomfortable. So you will also, it will be impossible for your nervous system to feel joy, love, gratitude, inspiration, energy, right? Because in survival, identity energy goes into survival. So it doesn't go into expansion and creation of who you truly are and authenticity. It's a maintenance issue here. Because you're masking it, right? People who are depressed, they do a lot of masking. They feel horrible inside, but they mask it, right? So they've learned to mask certain things. Anxiety as well. People don't talk about how they feel really internally because they want to forget about it, they want to be distracted from it, hence the scrolling, numbing, Netflix, drinking, like it's getting worse and worse actually. So, but you won't be able to, you will be feeling hopeless and helpless, right? You won't be able to feel hope, faith, connection, contribution. You won't have the energy because survival identity is a locked-in identity. Your ego will not allow you to move beyond that in your nervous system without you taking yourself by the hand and learning to exit it every day and teaching your body safety. Hey, we okay now, I'm here, I'm present, right? So your nervous system is more, that's the higher intelligence in you, which I teach in the course. You need to understand that things don't happen for no reason. So it's about choosing yourself, choosing life, choosing better, and becoming obsessed and getting addicted to working on yourself and building yourself, taking ownership of your inner reality, inner state, and your mind and your body, right? So whatever development or evolution you want to, and you need to be doing that in itself dissolves the anxiety and depression very often. Because once you have a sense of purpose and meaning, for at least, I don't know, you know where you're going, right? Then that gives you energy. You start generating energy, you start generating ideas, but you need guidance and you need orientation. So start orienting yourself for better. Start orienting yourself for improving, repairing the relationship with yourself and with your mind. Because if you don't, you're just going to create the same thing, Groundhog Day. The same problems, the same issues. You as a human being, self-actualization, actually, right? You should be growing out from your problem. You should be outgrowing your problems, rather. If you are 35 and if you have the same problems while you were 20, like you were 20, then that's an issue. Yeah, any questions? Thank you for all the likes. Thank you for listening. Ego is sense of self, and when alone, one can be divine, yes. Ego is a force in the psyche. It's a protective force. Ego becomes activated when you're not conscious. When you're conscious and you understand that you have your ego, you negotiate and integrate your ego. You don't dissolve it, you don't get rid of it. But ego is a specific belief. It's very important to know your ego. But again, in survival identity, because growth has layers. If you don't repair the relationship with your body, you can't then work within your mind, right? So it's like a dimension on which you need to go through stages. You can't jump into working on your ego and negotiating with your ego when your body is in survival. So that's not going to happen, right? And very often coming out of survival moves the ego to the side. So it doesn't rule you any longer. And just remember this, everyone has an ego. And some people, sometimes the ego, in the long run, I don't think the ego is the friend. Ego really doesn't like you to grow and evolve, because when you do expand your consciousness, ego stops existing And like anything within your consciousness, it doesn't want you to stop existing. So that's why when people are growing or upgrading their sense of self or identity, I don't know, becoming parents or whatever, very often the old patterns are even louder and it's difficult to get rid of, because ego will fight to the absolute end for you to stay where you are. Because ego knows that when you grow and evolve, you're not going to be interested in entertaining the ego anymore. So it's the psyche level, which again, if you feel like you want to work on, yeah, because some people that I work with, some people have the very good relationship with their body, and they come to the point where they're at the level of their mind now, where they're trying to grow, evolve financially, family-wise, or they're divorcing, or they're building a business, whatever, and they realize that they operate in 2 or 3 identities, right? Some of it is from the past. So, you can't live in 2 identities. You can, but it's very destabilizing. But the world is changing around people. Sometimes, just because it is, you get divorced, that would be like, that should show you that you have a perception. Someone who you saw as your best friend, suddenly after 6 months is not your best friend. So everything is in your head, basically. Everything just reflects the level of your consciousness. But this is where you have to upgrade your identity anyway. So, because everything is changing around you all the time. So it's about stepping into, being behind the wheel of that change, stepping into the participant in the change, not the observant of the change, which in survival identity is like, no, life happens to me, right? Level of consciousness, the first one is life happens to me. So there are people who I work with where they know that they know now that it's life happens by me. So I'm the participant and I'm the creator. But when you're shifting your identity, there's a point which is very destabilizing when you're in 2 realities and you don't know what you're doing. And sometimes you just go back to the stuff you know best, because the new world and new reality is not stabilized yet, right? And again, we constantly get pulled back into what we know. Old patterns, old habits. But this is because uncertainty is really uncomfortable for some people. Fear of life, as someone said, right? That gets translated and that manifests in a lot of different ways for people. And I haven't touched the archetypes, but I will probably later or tomorrow. Because the state of the nervous system, so fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and hide, which are different expressions of anxiety and depression, are related to the archetypes. So the tendencies, this is the physiological basis for your archetype, and you have to be working with your archetype in a way that each person in each of those states has different strengths and different things that they find challenging, right? For some people, the way to come out of survival is by taking action. For some people is by reorganizing their mind, right? This is why different frameworks, different therapy styles or ideas and concepts, they don't work for people because they're not matched with your nature, right? The same way so it's like reframing. The same way ADHD people now there is a lot of talk about actually it's a gift. Yes, it is a gift. It's just the way you process information completely differently, and that's the uniqueness of your nervous system. So to understand how you operate, it's absolute game changer. Guilt, fear can be transformed consciousness, but using the self to heal itself isn't contradictory. Is that a question? I'm going to answer this as it was a question, as it is a question. You actually, in survival identity, you identify with the ego, right? I am blah, 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 blah. But the way is not the self to heal itself. You activate higher consciousness and you stop identifying with the ego and with your survival patterns. So you are healing yourself through a divine connection to the higher consciousness. So it's nothing about the self, because each one of you is part of the universe and of the higher consciousness. What's blocking you is the self, identifying with, I am Carol, I live in London, I work as a nurse. Identifying with this thing rather than the true essence, which, as I said, a child of God coming from source, nervous system being part of nature. You are organic, natural part of nature. So whatever the narrative it might be. So you're actually healing the connection with the higher part, healing by restoring a connection to the higher parts of your existence. Rather than through your ego, or I have to stop doing that, or stop feeling that, right? It's actually like getting on the lift, and elevating yourself and activating higher consciousness, which is already there. It's already there. You're just unconscious, so it's dark. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Get in touch. Go onto my profile, click on the stuff there. It's an absolute game changer, and I'll see you probably. Thank you very much for listening. Like, again, thank you. It is really important to me. It's actually not about learning more. It's about activating what we already are. Thank you very much, and I'll see you shortly. Bye-bye.